Hello, my name is Jagmohan Singh Chawla, and in this video, let's have a deep dive for project management. So this video is going to be slightly long, and I suggest grab a coffee, be completely relaxed, and start watching. The good news is you don't have to watch the entire video. So this video will be split into chapters, and you can always skip to the section of your choice. But broadly, what are the areas that we will be covering? I want to explain what are the features and functions in a project as the capability is maturing, when to use multiple projects versus continue to use a single project, what is the relationship between a release and a project, when to be serious about release management, then as a partner or as a customer, what kind of options you have, what kind of flexibility you can bring to the table, can you customize content, can you bring your own content, and these are some of the agenda items we will be covering. So let's get into the system and let's get started with features and functions. So I'm logged on to SAP Cloud ALM as a project lead, and in fact I'm using the public demo tenant. So you should have also access to very similar data. Before we get started, it's very important to know that how SAP Cloud ALM is developed. We ship productive software every 2 weeks. So by the time you watch this video, many screens may have changed and many functionalities may have been added. So you just have to be aware of that. The starting point for a project lead is this style, projects and setup. There you actually start by creation of a project. So let's see how a project looks like. I'm not going to cover the project setup in this because there is a dedicated video for that already. And also I recommend you watch the end-to-end story, which gives you a nice idea on the context in which a project operates and which entities are project specific and project independent. So I assume you have gone through those videos. Link for that I'll put in the description, and that way you can begin into a deep dive, which is the main focus of this video. So when you log on to this screen, then a gentle reminder that this is a dual purpose screen. This is for a project lead to set a new project, but this is also including the setup of some entities which are cross project, such as roles, system groups, and deployment plans. Now focusing on the project itself, there are multiple tabs and different areas of information into each one of them. So first thing is you can create a project and you can create multiple projects. If you have too many projects, then you can just use a simple search to narrow down the selection list. What you also should notice is there are two tabs, active and archived. So we don't talk about this a lot, but what is this archived? Archive is a temporary hiding of a project. And why I call it temporary? Because you can restore it very easily. So let's try to see what happens. And when should you even archive a project? When, let's say, you create a lot of test data in your tenant and you don't want your users to be overwhelmed, but you also do not want to delete that because maybe you want to restore it for a training or for just experimentation. That way you can create all those projects, and when you are not using them, you can just click on this and archive them. When you click here, then they immediately appear in this different tab, and you can navigate to this tab and easily restore them. And now let's focus on the main project creation itself. So the steps to create a project, as I mentioned, are already included in a different video, but let's try to understand and go deep into what these things and settings mean. So let me go into the edit mode. And you can obviously give a title of your choice. You can select an Activate template. Selection of an Activate template converts the Activate instructions into a task list. And these tasks appear in your task list as normal tasks. The big difference is you cannot edit the description of the tasks that come from SAP Activate methodology. And this is done for good reasons, that these tasks come with certain limitations. But if you add your own tasks, which I'll explain shortly, which are called project tasks, there you can freely change the description. If you select a template, can you change it? The answer is yes. If by mistake you choose an incorrect template and later into the project you realize that was not the correct one, then you can fix it easily. And you can just say, you know what, instead of a 2SL as an example, I should have used a 3SL template. And then when you try to save it, you get a warning. So you are warned that this is in a way has some consequences. So it should be done only when you are absolutely sure, because it will remove all the tasks from the previous template. And technically it will not remove them. It will set them into a special state called obsolete. So if you are really sure, then you can go ahead and do it. I'll cancel the template change for now and proceed with the other settings. So let's talk about access restrictions. What is this access level and what are these options? So as a project lead, you have different choices. What kind of project setup you have in your organization? Do you have external contributors or it deals with some sensitive information? When you set the access level to public, this means all the users in the tenant, which may or may not be in your project, they can edit artifacts in your project. Now, this is valid, let's say if you are doing a feedback project and you are dealing with thousands of business users or end users, and you want them to freely enter their observations and do some collaboration, then you should really use this option to public. And the other extreme, if you're dealing with some sensitive information, and let's think it's a multi-vendor scenario and each vendor have their own project, then the recommended setting is private. This means any user which is not assigned to the project cannot even see the project information. So this is really closed. And for all practical purposes, most of the teams set the project to restricted state. What this means is the display of the information is allowed to all users in the tenant, even they may not be assigned, but the edit is restricted to only the team members which are explicitly assigned. So be careful in choosing the right option, but the good news is you can change it at any stage. What is this status? Status is actually a symbolic gesture. Maybe as a project manager, you want to signal to upper management, how is the project doing? Is it on track, or maybe you are struggling with resources or hardware and you want it to be noticed. But it is not coming from any automatic calculation. It is really a manually set flag, and also it can be changed at any time. What is the current phase? It's again a symbolic indication to your management what is the phase of the project. If you add custom phases, then even the custom phases appear in this list. But this is also set manually and it is not calculated automatically by anything. You can have multiple project leads. So this is also something which we'll discuss in the next point. When should you create multiple projects? That means even if you have multiple project leads, it does not mean you should go ahead and start creating multiple projects. The same project can handle multiple project leads as well. Now let's talk about time boxes. SAP Cloud ALM using a term time box as a generic term to denote phase, sprint, and sometimes even milestone. Let's talk about the phase. So these phase definitions come from SAP Activate methodology. And if you do not like these definitions, you can deactivate certain phases. If you want to enhance as a partner the methodology itself, you can even add your custom phases. What is the point to note on the relative order of these phases? If you add your custom phases, then they automatically get sorted by the dates. But the date order of the Activate phases is preserved. We highly recommend you do not deactivate the standard Activate phases, because from our experience, the success of an implementation is greatly enhanced the closer the project is to SAP Activate methodology. Also, please note that the prepare phase cannot be deactivated, and there is a reason for that. The prepare phase is used as fallback whenever the system cannot find the appropriate phase. Now let's try to understand the relationship between a sprint and a phase. We recommend you always align your sprint dates to the phase dates. And how you can do that is just the start date is important. The system looks at the start date of the sprint and finds the matching phase. In case there are multiple matches, then the first phase is shown. In fact, you can easily know in the display mode. So when I'm in display mode and I give my sprint dates, I immediately see the matching phase right next to the sprint. And that's how I know that I have done the setting correctly. When a sprint date is passed, then it automatically appears in the past state. And also show these icons. You can lock a sprint, and we will use the term lock and close interchangeably. What does locking or closing a sprint means? All it means it's not open for new work. And the example could be you may have some organizational rules that the sprint scope is frozen on, let's say, Thursday because the sprint has to start on Monday and the team needs some time to prepare. So you can plan a sprint and on Thursday, click on this lock icon. This means the existing scope that has gone into a sprint is preserved. New scope cannot go in. The other use case is after the sprint is completely finished, reviewed and retrospective done, then also you use this lock icon to say, you know what, this is now more or less a frozen state and it should not be changed. But since Cloud ALM is designed for flexibility, if you have good reasons, you can unlock the sprint and lock it again. So let's do that. So I have locked the sprint. I'm going to save it. And let me unlock it again. Now, as an auditor, that may make you nervous. But the good news is anything which is done in a project is logged. You can click on this history icon and you get date and timestamp of all the changes that have been done. And that way no person can abuse this process. Another safeguard is via authorization roles. As an example, many things such as the time box setup and the team setup can be done only by somebody who is having the authorization as project lead and not as a project member. So let's continue with milestones. Milestones also are aligned to phases. So milestones have just one date. So that date is found in the matching phase and that phase is also shown next to the milestone. Now let's move on to the teams tab. A project can have multiple teams. So this should be always remembered that you don't have to create multiple projects just because you have multiple teams. You can easily create as many teams as you want by going to the Teams tab outside the project and creating new teams there. Once the new teams are created, they are visible in this. There is one team which is special called the PMO team. So let's talk about the special team. The PMO team is the team that you get by default when you create a new project. And this is the only team which has the role project lead. And this role cannot be deactivated. So this is to ensure that project lead is present at least in one team and actually only in one team to establish accountability. Team is constituting of roles and people are assigned to these roles. You can add as many roles as you want by clicking on the role tab and adding a custom role. If the role list becomes too long, then you can easily deactivate it using the option here. One thing which you should know is teams are not reusable across projects as of the current state. It may change in future, but as of now, the teams are specific to a project. When you are assigning, you have two options. You can assign people to roles, or you can do the other way around. You can have a user-based view in which you enter the user first and assign them multiple roles. Please be very careful that the roles which are mentioned here are called project roles. They should not be confused with authorization roles, which are done in user management by somebody who has user administration privileges. Now let's talk about scope. Scope is a collection of processes that are managed together. It's a topic in itself, so it will be explained in a separate video. The deployment landscape gives the landscape to the project. This is also a huge topic, and if you are working deeply in this area, then I suggest you review the release and deployment planning video, and the link to that will also be added in the description of this video. The point you should know is when you assign a deployment plan, then you get the landscape assignment to a project. And what's the significance of that? How does a project benefit by knowing the landscape? The project benefit by navigating to certain systems directly when a task is clicked. Some of the tasks from SAP Activate methodology have system information embedded in them, such as this particular task should hit the quality system for SAP S/4HANA Cloud. And since the project knows that, okay, this is the specific system group, and this particular system group has a particular tenant in a quality role, in this case actually 3, then when somebody is trying to click a task meant for the quality system, then the person will be given 3 choices. Which one? So that is the benefit of assigning the landscape to the project, and the only way to do it as of today is by assigning a deployment plan to the project. Now let's talk about integration scenario. Currently we support only one integration scenario, but this will be enhanced in future. And the integration scenario is SAP Central Business Configuration. If you do the required setup, then this information will not be grayed out. And for that, there is a setup guide that describes how you can do that. Once you set this integration, then you connect SAP Cloud ALM to SAP Central Business Configuration. And in fact, you see all the projects which are in SAP Central Business Configuration right here. The advantage of doing it is then the project activities from SAP Central Business Configuration also appear in SAP Cloud ALM as a unified task list. So as a customer, you don't have to look at multiple tools to get same information. The fine print is the project activities coming from SAP Central Business Configuration become read-only tasks from a status perspective in SAP Cloud ALM. This means the status can be manipulated only on SAP Central Business Configuration side. And now let's talk about, should you create just one project or should you create multiple projects? It's not an easy question to answer, and my answer is going to be, it depends. And I know your reaction, depends on what? And that's what we are going to cover. So it depends on how you have structured and what kind of information is exchanged across teams and what is the working model. The simplest answer or the simplest need to separate data into different projects is these access restrictions. So if you are dealing with sensitive data, if you really want information of one project not to be visible to another project, then obviously you need different projects. That can be in different scenarios for dealing with sensitive information, or in general a multi-vendor scenario in which each partner has completely different areas of responsibility. And as a customer, you want to ensure that one partner is not looking at the data from another partner. So that is, I think, one of the main use cases why customers create multiple projects. But in general, you should avoid the number of projects created. And why I make that statement? The reason is all the reports, such as the overview page. So let's look at the overview page. So each project gets an overview page. And this page is restricted to one project. As of now, you can see overview of one project at one time. What this means is, if as a program lead you create 5 projects, then you have to see overview page 5 times of 5 different projects, which may increase your overheads. And then we get into the use cases of why did you create the 5 projects in the first place. If your whole intention was to keep scopes separate, then maybe you could have used 5 different scopes in the same project. If your purpose was to create teams separate, then maybe you could have managed by creating 5 different teams but still in the same project. If your goal was to split the projects by product, then also actually you can manage multiple products within the same project. In this example, I have created different projects for SuccessFactors and S/4HANA Cloud. But if you look at my deployment landscape, the system groups are available. That means I could have managed by having 2 product lines in the same project if I would have chosen to do that. Also, your applications such as task list, requirement list, process list, everything is restricted to one project at one time. That's why I recommend you try to keep the number of projects at absolute minimum, and you create different projects only if you have a valid business use case. And let's move on to the next topic. What is the relationship of release management and project management in SAP Cloud ALM? Release actually sets a timeline. And timeline of what? Timeline of deployment activities. And first of all, let's see where is that release information coming from. In my project, I have assigned a deployment plan. If I go to this deployment plan, then this deployment plan has a release schedule. And this release schedule gives me an indication on an end of event. So let's say if AGR2, which is Acron Group Release 2, is ending on June 30th, what's the significance of this information? Release is used for planning of your requirements and features to give a target deployment date to production. For features, release plays an extreme important significance. Release also gives a structure across projects because the same release definition can be used across projects because the same deployment plan can be assigned to multiple projects. In this example, I have assigned Acron Group deployment plan to 2 projects, one for SuccessFactors and one for S/4HANA Cloud. And in this case, maybe the teams were completely different, timelines were completely different, and it was a good reason to split the information into projects. But when it comes to integration testing, then obviously I want the 2 teams to talk to each other. And this is where release management comes very handy, because each project lead can define their own local time box schedule, but then the release manager steps in and says, everything is fine as long as you align your local timelines to the global release plan, which is defined by the release lead. So that's how it's easy to understand the need for release management. Another fundamental question is, do I need release management only if I'm using multiple projects? And the answer is no. And if you're using just a single project, you can still have release management pretty handy. How? Just take an example of a multi-country rollout. So let's say you have 3 countries going live at different stages, and you want to separate the timeline of each individual rollout and assume it's the same team which is going to work from one rollout to another, and maybe across teams such as development that may be working in multiple rollouts at the same time. That way you are better off managing in one single project, having a nice team structure with naming conventions, but defining the time of each rollout by this release and assigning this release basically via the deployment plan to the project. So that's where release and project management should be used in conjunction to get appropriate benefit. Another huge advantage of this deployment plan and release concept is an application called release and timelines. So let's look into that. So I'm on my Launchpad, and when I click on the style release and timelines, I see a cross view across projects. And this is really interesting. So currently this is the only cross project reporting we have. That means in case you are dealing with multiple projects, but they have synergies, then you should assign the same deployment plan and the same release to all these projects. And that way you can get a very interesting cross view on features, requirements, user stories, etc. You can also see a nice timeline view and quickly see how your release timelines are aligned to projects' individual time boxes. Now let's move on to our next agenda item. What kind of flexibility SAP Cloud ALM allows for a project lead? So we discussed time boxes. So as a project lead, you can bring your own phases. You can add custom phases and they also get automatically sorted based on dates. You can deactivate the phases coming from SAP Activate with due diligence, of course, but this is completely flexible. Then creation of sprint schedule is fully flexible. And also we allow overlapping phases and overlapping sprints by choice. So there are situations in which different teams could be working in parallel and you can have a team specific sprint and you can do that via naming convention. Tool does not restrict you from doing that, but you should be very careful if you are dealing with overlapping information because then some of the reports may not be as legible as you think. You can add your own roles very easily and you can then use those custom roles in your teams. You can add as many teams as you want. And let's talk about the project structure for a second. SAP Cloud ALM delivers structured content in phase, deliverables, and tasks. So phase is the highest level. Under phase, you can have deliverables, and under deliverables, you can have tasks. And you should know that you can bring your own deliverables. When you look at the UI, you don't see an option to create deliverable easily, but you can do that via Excel upload. You can just download an Excel template, add your own custom deliverable and upload that Excel sheet. That way you can bring structured content very easily in which you have your own definitions of deliverables and your own definition of tasks below that deliverable. SAP Cloud ALM also offers you deliverable-based reporting out of the box, which can prove to be very handy. What other thing is flexible? There is another attribute called work streams. To do that, you can go to this Adapt Filters and you can see the existing definition that is provided by SAP Activate. So you can see a lot of work streams and some of them are provided by system and some of them have been added by different customers or it's a shared tenant by just using Excel upload. So that's really important that via Excel upload you can also bring your own specific work streams very easily. And the last thing which I want to explain is tags. Tags also add a lot of flexibility. If you use good naming conventions, especially as an example, name value player, then let's say you have a status called deprecated, or you have a priority called extremely critical. And SAP Cloud ALM will not provide all these options, but if you use these custom tags, you can add any number of tags, again, easily via Excel upload. And that way you can have a very flexible way of working and managing your own workflow. So the last thing which I wanted to explain is how to bring your own content. We discussed a lot about Excel upload. So how to do that? There is a template which you can download, manipulate it, and then upload it again. There is a dedicated blog post for that with examples that also will be referred in this video. Actually, the more interesting option is using APIs. So the API for projects and tasks are already published and they are available on API Hub. I highly recommend you try these APIs and they can definitely achieve a lot. And if you find things which are missing or attributes that you would want to be supported via API, feel free to contact us. You can even leave a comment on this video. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. It was a long video, but I hope it was worthy of your time. You can get in touch with us via multiple channels. The first thing you should do is join our community. SAP Cloud ALM community is really active and there are multiple authors who write blog posts. You can read those posts, leave a comment. There is a Q&A tool in which you can ask a question and the experts in this community step up and try to help you. Even you can also contribute by answering some of the questions as a community member. In case you are really stuck somewhere, do not hesitate to send an email to sapcloudalm@sap.com or if you think there is a feature that you are really missing, feel free to get in touch with us. So thanks for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you like it and stay tuned for more information. Thanks and have a great day.